Good evening. This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The time is 7:01 p.m. and the date is February 14th, 2023. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates, the alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Present tonight are members Robert Delich, Joe Kraus, Kelly Sauber, and Kay Towsley, and alternate Aaron Thomas. I am Lisa Carson, the chair. Also present is zoning administrator Mr. David Riggs. At this time, I invite you to view a pre-recorded video on the rules and procedures of the board. The Athens Board of Zoning Appeals operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reason why the appeal should be viewed favorably. No, I don't think so, yeah. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer concluding, summary, or rebuttal remarks. Testimony from the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.03b, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.10c, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. Any person, resident, or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. Thank you. Record that alternate Ben Lockman has arrived. There's one case on tonight's agenda regarding the property at 269 East State Street. The board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda please stand? Do you affirm or swear that any testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. So, let's see, case 2301C at 269 East State Street in an R1 zone. The appellant is requesting a conditional use permit in accordance with Athens City Code 230401C3 to allow a non-owner occupied short-term rental in an R1 zone. Mr. Riggs, do you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Chair. The appellant is requesting this code change, and I wanted to note that this is a new code that went into effect in the latter part of 2021. So these are fairly new regulations. I'd also like to point out this is a conditional use request. The board actually gets 4 types of requests: a request for a variance of the zoning rules, a conditional use permit, interpretation, and a temporary use permit. So this is the second of those 4 jobs that you have as the board, is to make a conditional use decision. And in conditional use is a little bit different from what we usually see. 95 or 99% of everything we see is a variance request. So this is a little bit different on trying to, or making a determination where I'll just read this part of the Article 7, Final Disposition of Cases. Part of what you have to do is offer your opinion as to the desirability or undesirability of the proposed building use as regards to adjoining premises, general intent, and the general intent of the zoning ordinance. Now that is different from a variance request where you don't have to do that portion of it. I just wanted to note that because that's not something we see every day.
So that's why there wasn't a page in our materials saying why it had been denied?
Correct. It's not been denied. Yeah.
Okay, I see that now. I was confused by that. Are there questions for the code administrator?
Yeah, so the conditional use, I assume that's because it's a property that is adjacent to East State Street, because I think that the ordinance that passed allowed short-term rentals with non-owner occupied short-term rentals along East State Street and Lancaster and Carpenter and Columbus, right? Something like that.
For owner-occupied short-term rentals, that's allowed by the code on in those areas. This conditional permit request is for non-owner-occupied short-term rentals in that same area.
I was thinking that was automatically allowing a non-owner occupied, but it does not.
Does not.
So that's why we're here. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
This is the new code that passed last year, correct?
2021, yes.
2020, okay.
Other questions? Okay, could we hear from the appellant or the appellant's representative?
That's me. Do I stand here?
Thank you.
or
Please
here?
come to the podium and, for the record, state your name and address.
My name is Aaron Williams. My home address is 6192 Greyfriar Way in Dublin, Ohio.
And go ahead and make your case.
First off, I would just like to say I'm a little embarrassed. There's only one thing on the agenda and everybody showed up, but I am very glad. I'm very glad that you showed up because I had breakfast in Orlando, lunch in Atlanta, and then dinner is going to be at a drive-through, probably on State Street on the way home tonight. I will tell you that the impetus to do this was sort of born out of frustration. I went to college here, grew up on a dairy farm that I still have that is in Athens County, and my daughter is a sophomore at Ohio University now in the nursing school. Last year, I decided to reserve a hotel room for Dad's weekend 6 months in advance. And as it turns out, 6 months isn't even close to enough advance notice. And I literally got to the point where I looked at anything that was available. And there are a few motels around here that probably wouldn't be my first pick unless I was somewhat desperate to have a place to stay that weekend. And even those were booked solid. Not only was it in Athens that it was booked solid, it was booked all the way to Lancaster and all the way to Parkersburg, where I ended up staying. And I thought, well, this is just crazy. So I started asking around. And what I realized is that there's sort of an elasticity issue, and it's around big events. So if it's a random Wednesday or a Tuesday, it's not hard to get a hotel room here. The hotels that I contacted to ask just on a regular day of the week, or a weekend that wasn't Sibs weekend or the Miami game or something, the weekends have higher occupancy rates, but during the week, it's in the 30 to 40%, which really wasn't a shock to me, just having been in the area. But I also learned in order for a lot of hotels to be profitable, they need to be in the 50 to 60% occupancy range on a sustained period of time. So what happens on those weekends is everything is full. And so suddenly people are staying in Logan or Nelsonville or Belpre or Parkersburg or Marietta, and that revenue is going out of town too. And I will tell you, my Lyft driver was very happy to drive me all the way to Parkersburg. But it's not very feasible to build 5 more hotels, because that will drop the regular occupancy rate even lower than it is now. And so to me, this is actually a good thing. I had researched Airbnb or VRBO, short-term rental properties in a lot of other markets, but I have to admit, they were all vacation markets. And my wife and I thought, well, that'd be really nice to have a house in a vacation market. Well, we'll use for a week or two a year and then rent it out. But a lot of those markets are oversaturated, and this one is certainly not. The other thing is, and this is a little different, like we intend to use it. It's not this. We're not trying to book it all the time, nonstop. We're fortunately not in a situation where we need that. The farm that we have lacks 2 things that drive my kids completely nuts, and they love going to the farm. One is their cell phones don't work there, and 2 is there's no Wi-Fi there. So they're bored to death at about 15 minutes. But they do love going to the farm, and like I said, our daughter goes here. So we started doing some homework and looked around town and found a lovely property on State Street and bought it. And now we're in the process of paint and furniture and all of that. So that's kind of the background. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. This is the first time we have purchased something that we want to do a short-term rental, and we want to be a part of it. So it's not in Florida or somewhere where, we're 90 minutes away door to door, and we're down here a lot. So, I mean, that's kind of the setup, I guess. Did you have any questions?
Surely you have questions.
With your daughter down here, does she plan on moving into the house?
No way. No, in fact, I'd be happy if there was never a college kid in the house. Now, I will tell you that we had a scenario, and our neighbors really helped out, where she lives about 50 yards that way, and lives with a bunch of other girls, and one of the girls was threatened with a gun. And they locked down the facility, but none of the girls felt safe. So they went straight to our house, and the neighbors gave them blow-up mattresses. Totally saved the day. So other than a scenario like that, we're going to be, the nice thing that I've learned about Airbnbs and VRBOs, if you're familiar with Lyft or Uber, there's a mutual rating system. And if you have a bad rating, you will not get to rent a property. There's also a vetting process. We're allowed to inquire, what are you going to use the property for? How many people are going to be there? Are you going to have a pet? And we have cameras that are going to be mounted on the exterior of the house. So we'll be able to see, well, that's weird. Said it was 3 people and there's 13 piling in. There's a degree of control that you don't have when it's just an online booking and there's no human involved, which that was kind of news to me.
I have a question. Once your daughter graduates and presumably moves on, would your need to do stuff in Athens diminish?
I don't think so, for a couple reasons. My parents now live in Belpre, and we still have the farm in Athens, and there's no, obviously I don't farm it. We rent it out, and it's been in the family for 100 years. So there's really no desire to sell it. My wife and I, we've got another kiddo that is a sophomore in high school, and she would like to go to OU, but that's not a guarantee that that happens. I don't have any desire or any need, and we're not fortunately in a financial situation where we would have to do something in a few years. In a perfect world, this would be something that we would pass down to the kids, and if they wanted to live there, great. If they wanted to continue to rent it, great. They could do whatever they wanted.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think just in that scenario you described where you had an inappropriate use of your property. So 13 people showed up for a party at your place, and you were expecting 3 that had been booked, right? Not being here, I guess, is one of the questions, and that's why we're here talking, is because you're not in the property, you're not living there, so you don't have a direct control. So if that kind of scenario were to happen, what would you do?
So there's recourse within Airbnb, and I don't have it printed out, so I can't read it, but it goes back to this rating thing. I use Uber when I travel a lot because it's just more convenient than renting a car. If my rating were to fall below 4.2, I don't get picked up. It's that simple. Airbnb works that way too. There's financial recourse. You can terminate a stay. That is one of the reasons, the other being security for us and for the guest, on having security cameras at every door. What we don't have is the ability to be here in 5 minutes and go, hey, everybody, you got to get out.
So how about if we take that a step further and there's a noise problem or there's a complaint?
Yeah.
I don't know how that's dealt with. So if the police show up, I guess it's the occupants that have to respond to that police inquiry.
It is, but it's actually a
Do you
great
get notified,
question.
or I don't know how that would work.
So when you build the profile of the property, and I've been looking at others, you lay down some established ground rules. And a great example of that is noise levels. So I am permitted to install a noise monitor within the house. And it tracks the noise levels. And you could say, this is a residential area. At 10 p.m., it's got to be below this level. And if it's not, you're in violation. And the data doesn't lie. Like, the sensor's producing real-time feedback.
Quick question. I think I know which house it is, but I'm not 100% sure how large it is. How many like bedrooms or
It
people?
technically has
beds?
4 bedrooms,
Yeah.
but we're reducing it to 3
Okay.
and turning one into a home office. And that was a personal decision. I travel a lot, and I've always got to have my laptop and all my stuff, and I think that's becoming more and more common.
Yep.
I also thought of scenarios like even my parents' house in Belpre. It's not big enough for our whole family to stay at. But I really wouldn't want to rent 2 rooms at the Hampton Inn. I would much rather have a house that would accommodate all of us, and I would have a home office to be able to do my stuff in. And I thought about just folks that grew up in Athens, still have their parents here. Maybe they live, somewhere out of town, and when they come to visit, it's just not entirely convenient to cram everybody into the house they grew up in. Another thing that has sort of come up quite a lot lately are the folks that I went to college with. They now have kids here on the basketball team, on the baseball team. They're swimmers. They live in Denver. They live in Dallas. And grandma and grandpa want to come see them play, but they also don't really want to be in the Hampton Inn. So if they've got a place where the whole family can be, it's just a little bit more comfortable, and it's actually less expensive.
So would the occupancy be 6-ish people, 3 bedrooms?
It could be more than that. There isn't a finished attic, and we probably will put a single up there, but it's a 1.5 bathroom. And so could you get 7 people in there? Yeah, you could. But really, with a 1.5 bath, that represents a choke point in terms of, it's just not ideal for that. The research that I did using a product called AirDNA showed that the ideal rental size, and there are rooms for rent here, so I'm only looking at 2 and 3 bedroom for comparisons, and it came out to 5.9 was the optimal sleeping arrangement, and so that's what we've optimized for.
I have a question for Mr. Riggs about that. Isn't there a requirement that if we granted this, that there be no more than 3 adult renters?
That's correct. For
Plus
this zone, no more than 3 adult renters plus related children is the way the code is written.
Are children of any age, or?
It doesn't specify age, yes.
So with the addendum on that, what is how is that policed?
I'm sorry?
How is that policed by your agency?
It would be complaint driven.
Right.
Yep.
Do you have a sense of what your occupancy might be over the course of a year?
Being completely honest, having never done this before, I don't. I'm also, like, we're gonna put a lot into it in terms of, like, I want to make it as nice as I possibly can. And I don't mean this in any way disrespectfully to anyone else that has a short-term rental, but the ones I looked at, there were a number of them where I thought, boy, I would not stay here. And I think at a very reasonable price point, there is an opportunity to put a very nice rental that I know my mom and dad would feel comfortable in. I know my friends from out of town that want to see their son play basketball would be entirely comfortable in. We're trying to buy higher end everything, furnishings. We're trying to think of every little thing someone could need from out of town. We're also looking at incenting local businesses. So there's a great little breakfast shop across the street. There's a great little bread company, Avalanche Pizzas right down the street. Like, we want to provide gift cards. So if someone's in town, like, they're sampling stuff that is local to Athens. So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of wandering off the answer, but, like, we are trying to drive to a certain clientele, and I honestly don't know what to expect. It could be, it's only rented 20% of the time or 30% of the time. We are very fortunate that financially, if that happens, like, we're not in a position where we have to sell it or try to get out of the situation at all. If anything, that gives us more of an opportunity to use it, and our neighbors have just been great so far.
I would say, just from my interaction with the Airbnb market locally, it's pretty much 100% occupancy on weekends that school's in session, and event weekends in Athens during the summer. Almost 100%. If you want to rent it, it would be occupied. You can't,
Weekends, but not a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with you can put caps on the limit on the websites on Vivo and Airbnb.
Oh,
correct?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can put a cap and say this is the max, and you'll be able to see it on camera, correct?
Yeah, well, you can do that. You really have the ability to dictate the terms.
Right.
There's
Okay.
exceptional levels of granularity that you don't get with just a hotel that you book online. Again, you go to the noise ordinance, it's how many vehicles, and we do have a long double driveway, so one of the things I was surprised to learn of the amenities that were the most, like, the top priority amenity in Athens for a short-term rental was parking.
Yep.
That's not a newsflash for you. For me, I was like, really? Number 2 was a kitchen. Number 3 was air conditioning. So we're close enough to Uptown. I mean, it's not a 1-minute walk. It's about an 8-minute walk. We've got ample parking, so it doesn't add to congestion uptown.
One additional question: Are you making any significant changes to the home to kind of make it like customize it for short-term use?
No, it's mainly cosmetic. I can tell you so we're adding a handrail to the front of the house, and that was mandated by the insurance company from a safety perspective, and we have a handrail already on the back entry. But other than that, it's paint and decor and furnishing, so there's really nothing structural at all.
So I have a question for Mr. Riggs. So since he's changing from 3 to 4, would that change anything with this, since he's going from a 3-bedroom and turning one of the bedrooms to an office space? Would that change anything?
So for let's say this was a long-term rental unit, the maximum amount of occupants would still be 3. So for any rental, that's the maximum.
So Dave, was this part of the addition that changed, you said in 21? The C3 230401 C3, is that
Yeah.
part of the new addition?
I could read that to the board if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that.
I think that would be
might help.
good, and I'd also like to hear, since this is new, what the council's discussion and what the reasoning was on discussing specifically limiting short-term non-resident owner rentals. And I think that's an important aspect of, because we had a dissenter notify the board of concerns, and I think this specifically hits what that person's concern was.
So ACC 230401C is for conditional uses, and there's several of them. Third on that list is short-term rentals, and that's the 3. It reads short-term rentals, non-resident owner short-term rentals, the keeping of not more than 3 adult renters plus related children by a non-resident owner for periods of less than 30 days on R1 lots that abut an R2, R3, or any B zone, or that the principal home fronts on East State Street, Carpenter, Lancaster Street, or Columbus Road.
So what aspect of this has changed with the adjustment in 21?
There was no short-term rental wording in the code.
Right.
That was not, we didn't have any wording we didn't have any zoning for short-term rentals, so we
it was
added that.
acceptable up till this point?
It was not.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Yes,
clarify
it was
for
not.
for everyone.
Yeah, we had a bunch of cases in the past that there was just no short-term rental in the city at all to 21.
Yeah, they were not legal, and
Right.
this ordinance enabled them to be legal with restrictions. And so the restrictions we're talking about, I wasn't aware that this would be limited to 3 adult occupants as part of that. I thought it wouldn't be capped at that level, but, so that's interesting to see. So it's 3 adult occupants is the limit with 3
Related
more
children.
related children?
There's no limit on the number of
No
children.
limit on the children.
With related children, okay. So,
So when we have a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath house, we have to accept the responsiveness or the responsibility of the person.
So he would apply for the permit for a short-term rental and would have to be for 3 renters.
He's already mentioned the 5.9 is
Yeah.
optimum for what he has.
That wouldn't be allowed. 3
Right.
would be what would be allowed.
Well, unless they were
Right.
kids.
Yeah, unless there were
children would be
kids,
allowed,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some children.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
3 adults. Yeah.
Is it 3 unrelated adults?
It doesn't say that.
It's just 3 adults.
3 adults, yeah.
I never thought of that.
Are there any further questions for the appellant? Because he maybe would like to take a seat. Mr. Williams, you go ahead and be seated, and you will have a chance. We're going to hear from people in the audience, and you'll have a chance to respond to their comments and
So
questions.
one more question.
Yeah,
for
go
Mr.
ahead.
Riggs. Can I do that now?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
So along that line, so if there's a limit of 3 adults, the city has mechanisms in place, a contract in place, or subscription or something, with a service that sort of looks across the internet and Airbnb and VRBO, and lets the city know if there are Airbnbs out there, what they are, does an inventory for you, right? Gives you
That's
updates
correct,
regularly. So would it also alert you to the cap we're talking about?
It does, yeah, and we check that regularly.
Okay.
I got a question. I'm slightly confused by this. So with a conditional use permit, David, we grant it for this gentleman. And then, just because the neighbors don't like him, and they make numerous amounts of complaints over it being more than 3 people, the conditional use permit could potentially be taken away from him in that capacity? If it's if it's overoccupied, wouldn't it be?
So if he's overoccupied, he would get a notice of violation, and he'd have a certain amount of time to correct that. And again, we go back and we'll check those advertisements on whatever the internet vending system that they use. And if they continue to do that, it would be notice of violation, order to comply, and then court action.
Okay, so all that would be, so it would be done personally to him before the conditional use permit would be potentially stripped?
That would be before it would be stripped, yes.
Would it ever be stripped?
It could, yes.
But through a judicial process?
Yes.
A judge would have to
Yes.
determine that? And otherwise, it goes with the house forever and ever?
It stays with the address,
It
not the owner.
stays with the address,
Right.
Okay,
yes.
all right.
So then, how about the permit itself? If there's violations, we're talking about, the city would have the ability to potentially nullify the permit and without having to remove the conditional use potentially. Is that possible? So if there's violations like we're talking about, and the city's like, yep, you violated this, so repeatedly, and have not made corrections, and so therefore you lose your permit.
I don't want to get in the weeds too far, but yes, that could happen. It could also be that it's not be used for more than a year. It would lose that conditional use. They'd have to come back to the board for reinstatement.
So is it term limits on the permit? Is it 12 months or 6
If
months?
it's not used for more than a year, if it's, and you'd have to, of course, you'd have to prove that wasn't advertised or anything, but yeah, it's a condition, it's conditional, and it would be, if it's not used for a while, they'd have to reapply.
Okay, I'll let that percolate, and we'll see about getting comments. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the conditional use request? Anyone present wish to speak in general comment? Okay, next is people who would like to speak in opposition. And I'm going to start by just reading the letter that we received on that topic that Kelly mentioned. This is someone who's written, Barry and Jean Thomas have written, who are not near neighbors, but they have written out with concerns about the R1 zone. As homeowners in an R1 zone, designated as such just a few years ago after a concerted effort by the homeowners in the block below Jacob Street, we are generally opposed to any Airbnb incursions into R1 zones. In particular, we oppose any non-owner occupied Airbnbs, which seem to negate the purpose of an R1 designation. And they ask that that be entered into the record. So, yeah.
Lisa, I actually have a second one. I don't know if you maybe didn't receive
Oh, I guess
that.
not.
I have not seen either.
Thanks, David. Okay, so a second letter from a resident of 75 Elmwood Place. I just heard about this request for approval of a short-term rental at 269 East State Street. We have so many short-term rentals in Athens, it seems we shouldn't have to provide more. This is an area that is primarily owner-occupied. I'm afraid this might be the start of more requests, with apartments now being built on the other side of East State Street. Please, let's try to keep our neighborhood less commercialized. And that's from Judy Smucker on Elmwood Place. Okay, at this time, we would like to hear from anyone who is here to speak in opposition. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, excuse me. Excuse me. My name is Jack Stoffer. I am not a good public speaker. I have prepared remarks here, but I'm going to have to wing a couple things up front because of what I've heard so far. So I'm going to say this. The gentleman who spoke made reference to his affluence several times. He seems to be a charming man. He has a nice personality. He presents his case well. I, on the other hand, am not a good public speaker and come across as matter of fact. So I'm going to speak matter of fact. My name is Jack Stoffer. I live at 69 Elmwood Place, Athens. I became aware of this situation this morning by a concerned neighbor, so I am somewhat prepared to speak. Here we go. Let me start by telling and reminding this body that I fought to preserve the R1 neighborhood and lost to City Council, where many people in that public meeting down at the community center and in meetings even in this council chamber spoke up for our existing property rights, which ended up being diminished. I am speaking exclusively about R1. I would point out to you, as I did to council, that surveys were taken on the Near East Side and submitted to council where 90-some% were opposed to short-term rentals. So please keep that in mind as you ponder this decision in front of you that could very easily have a significant negative impact and or conflicts with surrounding neighbors. Noise, litter, and the taking of our peaceful enjoyment of our backyards and homes. But let me be more specific. Appellant lives in Dublin, Ohio. Mr. Williams states on the application that he will be the property manager. It appears property was purchased December 22nd, 2022, recorded 1/3/23. Seems safe to assume this property was purchased as a business decision since he made application almost immediately. Applicant clearly shopped and purchased in R1 when property was and is for sale in every zone in town. I will assume and want you to consider that he intends to walk right over the existing property rights of us neighbors and push this board aside on his way to success. Please consider these conditions and possibilities and facts. Mr. Williams is in Dublin. Mr. Williams is the manager. A problem of some sort arises. He is 1.5 hours away at best, even if he really was concerned and wanted to do something. The city of Athens has a law of only 3 unrelated people may reside in R1. Let me jump off script. He stated before he became aware that he intends to rent this to 5 or 6 people, 5.9, whatever. It doesn't matter. As Mr. Riggs spoke, and as I understand, you're allowed to rent to 3. If you got a short-term rental, you can rent to 3 people. If you've got a 1-year rental, you can rent to 3 people. You can rent to 3 people. After speaking with the code office today, it was stated that they have no way to check or control that law. At least if it's a normal rental, they can go in and count beds and dressers and make an accurate assessment of the property. The code office is open from 7:30 to 4 Monday through Friday. In all likelihood, any problems that will arise will be when the office is closed and no one is on call. The police will not get involved according to the code. Applicant is asking you to assume there will never be a problem. I am asking/telling you that you need to consider worst case scenario, because sometimes what you get is worst case scenario. This is a large house which seems to invite large groups and parties. And jumping off script again, let's be honest. This is Athens, Ohio. This is our town. It's my town. He's been a part of it. It's all in his past, which is great. But people don't come down here to walk down the bike path. They come down here to drink and party and raise hell, which is all fine and good as long as it's not infringing on other people. But a big house, unsupervised, no code enforcement on the weekends, it's a possible can of worms. Thank you.
Is that it?
No. Hell no.
Okay.
The code office is... Okay,
Mr. Stauffer?
Yes.
You can't speak indefinitely. So
Okay.
you've made a couple
Here's
of
what I got.
major
I
points.
got one paragraph and one page.
Okay. I mean, because you've just definitely made some points that we're well aware of
Ma'am,
now about.
I understand that I might even be alienating you, so you give him the damn thing. But
No, it doesn't work that way. I'm just saying that
The fact is, I'm a taxpayer, and I want to say what I've got written on this piece of paper.
Yes, you can do that, but I'm
Thank you.
just wishing to tell you that you have made the point adequately that this would be a non-resident, a non-owner occupied Airbnb.
May I continue?
Yes, please do.
I am telling you that you need to consider the worst case scenario. If you pay attention to our news in towns and cities across America, these short-term rentals have had everything from parties out of control to large fights to shootings and killings. A completely unsupervised house of this size and scenario is ripe for problems to occur. I believe some cities and towns are taking measures to try to now regain control of their previous quality of life. Mr. Williams is asking you to make a favorable decision. Do him a favor. For him to operate a business in an R1 zone when he could have just as easily purchased a property in a different zone. I am only asking you to help protect my and your neighbors' property rights from being eroded and losing the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of our property, which we currently have. We purchased, all who reside in R1 because we wanted to live in R1, and we would appreciate it if we get R1. According to code, this is the first test case of this type, non-owner occupied in R1. Please consider the quality of life of us Athenians over an outright business venture in an R1 neighborhood. Now in your 23.07.02a, it says, and that such use shall not result in significant negative impacts upon or conflict with surrounding uses. I try to always be polite, and it doesn't always come off that way. That's the reason I tried to go with prepared remarks, but those are true facts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would wish to speak in opposition to our granting this conditional use? Please start by stating your name and address.
Yeah. So hello, I'm Lorraine McCosker. I live at 59 Elmwood with my husband, Franz Doppen. We moved to that site 20 years ago. We're coming in our 20-year anniversary. We chose Athens. We had several job offers at the time, and we chose Athens because of its community, because of the quality of life here. And it's been a really great experience living here. At that time when we moved to our house, we had a neighbor across the street, and I'm just sort of painting a picture of why this is critical to me, who had grown up in that house, Virginia Franklin, and she died there. So she was living there 80-something years. I have neighbors that I know who lived there at least since 1979. I might not know. Since the time we've lived in our home, 2 houses, house on either side, that were owner-occupied are now rentals. So we share that space with 3 rentals on one side and 3 on the other. I'm just bringing that up because it's really changed. I think that shows us the pressures that are being placed on this community. And that's my primary concern, is the change that we're seeing. We're seeing it globally, and we know that real estate investments are some of the best ways you can use your money at this point with real volatile markets. And I'm real concerned about that. So we are indeed opposed to this variance, both my husband and I. As it is now, many of the houses in the stretch of East State Street are owner-occupied, and that makes it very special. Some of the houses further west are not. They're rentals. But this one particular stretch, it's still owner-occupied, and it maintains a certain quality because of that. During this time, we've seen a growth in some of the businesses, with the Village Bakery, with the investment firm, Kindred, and Bakery, enhancing the quality of that life. We also have seen the decline of Larry Conrath, and that transition into a large flats and places that are going to put pressures and change that community as it is, more pressures on the road and the traffic. Directly next door to 269 is 271, and that backs up to my home. So my home is right here, and 271 is behind it, and 269 touches it. We share a corner there. They indeed, I believe, received a variance in May. But that was a very different situation. They moved into that house. They lived there, and there was a little garage apartment in the back. That had been rented for many years. And Code knew it, because I called Code on them a couple of times. They came. They were burning a fire really close to my house and left it going. So I had Code. Code knew it. I talked to that person. And they pretty much sold that house to those people. Those people bought that thinking, oh, okay, we have a permit to rent this to help pay our mortgage. And that's totally normal. But this is quite different. We have a building that was owner-occupied and is going to be changed into a rental. And at face value, one little rental doesn't do a terrible damage, but it's the cumulative effects that we're facing in this community, and this community is changing. Sorry, I'm reading my phone because my printer didn't work.
Have you had any issues with noise with the?
With 271.
271. Since you.
Not the new people haven't rented it, to my knowledge.
Oh, they haven't.
But before, there were. Yeah, it was actually.
Yeah.
It could be loud. That rental is right up to our fence.
Sure. I mean, our impression is that they have rented it, on Airbnb, the little
I haven't seen anything.
back. So it has had no effect on
No.
you with the
No.
short-term rentals.
No.
Okay.
And I'd like to say that I'm more worried about the big picture, the strategic approach to how we're dealing with housing in this city as compared to Airbnb. I have Airbnb'd all around the world. Most recently, interestingly, I was in Chicago, and my last email from the person getting my key said, "Don't tell the neighbors you're Airbnb." So it's documented, there's lots of media about the pressures of Airbnb and lesser, I think, with VBRO because they're longer. So in a city that maintains over 75% rental stock before short-term rental, this puts particular stresses on the community in terms of reducing community structure, eliminating owner-occupied homes, and thereby decreasing our property values. The role of home ownership in personal wealth building is well known. Simply, the more buildings taken out of circulation for ownership, the greater the pressures on remaining buildings and increased building costs. So people who have a chance to purchase a home and help build their wealth, I know that that's what we did when we were young, but by continually removing these less expensive homes, and this is not less expensive, from the market and renting them, putting them into rental stock, it impacts the community structure. I looked up the sale of this house since 2009, just to give you an idea. In 2009, it sold for $168. In 2013, $190. In 2019, $255. And in 2023, $331. That's what Mr. Williams purchased it at. It was listed last spring at $379. There was this huge boom. One of the houses on our street, one of the smallest, sold for $470 to somebody out of state. And they came in and purchased that. And so there is a huge pressure going on with real estate. We know that. I'm wondering if there is a strategic plan, because to me, it doesn't seem like there is, for the city to address the critical nature of housing in our city. And it's always been rentals, and now it's short-term rentals. How many houses can we take out of circulation to be owner-occupied and for people to be able to own without huge ramifications? I mean, and we change our community structure. Our street, we have community. We know each other. We share some of the problems and the joys that we have, simply because we've been there a long time. But if that's removed, it challenges the whole community. And that indeed is one of the critical issues that we have, or benefits that we have in Athens as a community. And, you know, Mr. Stauffer made reference to the reference to affluence. You know, as someone who teaches about Appalachian poverty and the environment, this is indeed one of the poorest counties in the entire nation. And we really can't afford to have, I would think, investments coming in wildly and really impacting that. So for that wealth to be drawn out of our community. So in conclusion, as a city owner, I think that as a citizen, I believe the city must consider and envision a community, the city and environment that we want in order for it to come to fruition. I am thankful to have landed in Athens for the human community that is here and the natural environs and much more. I hope that Athens is able to maintain the quality and dignity of a small town that is not exploited for all the wealth it can provide for a few people. Thank you.
Thank you. come on up and tell us your name and address.
Hello, I'm Christine Hughes. I live at 461 Siegel Lane in Athens, and I'm also the owner of the Village Bakery across from this home. It's at 268 East State Street. And the concerns I have mostly been covered, but I just wanted to say that I want to welcome Mr. Williams to Athens, and he is welcome to live in that house and rent it out during the busy weekends, and he might be able to accomplish some of what he's aiming to do. And also that there's other properties that are available that can be developed into short-term properties, but this home was purchased with the knowledge that it's not something that's permitted there. So my primary concern is really the shortage of affordable housing for year-round residents, and especially I'm concerned for my own employees. It's really hard for them to find affordable housing within the city of Athens. And one other thing is the shortcomings of Athens that were brought up by Mr. Williams are true. That during special events such as Parents' Weekend, athletic events, graduation, etc., these are real problems, and they're definitely worthy of a problem-solving discussion to help us figure out how to accommodate these sudden influxes of people, because it's really hard on, it's great for business, but it's also really hard on the businesses, and it's really hard on the local population. So yeah, it'd be great if we could actually have an economic boom from those influxes, but it's a little tough. But I don't think that this is a solution that that will work for the neighborhood or the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, you can come up and respond as you see fit.
Okay. Geez, I almost don't even know where to start. I guess I'll try to go in order, and I forget everybody's name, so I'm sorry about that. I'm also not a good speaker. My heart's bouncing out of my chest right now, and this is a pretty safe room to talk in. So I hear the concerns. The couple things that stuck out to me, and I do think this is a conversation that's happening across the country and in all kinds of different markets about the sort of explosion in short-term rentals. In this particular case, for us, there is zero desire for this to turn into a party house. Zero. You know, that's part of the vetting process. Tonight, I learned for the first time that 3 adults was the limit. For a minute, I thought, oh boy, what do we do? Then I thought about it, and I thought, well, nothing changes. You know, we're not looking to get 18 people crammed into a 1.5 bathroom place to begin with. That was never the point. The point was to have a nice place to stay for folks that come to town. And if that's 4 days, great. If it's 1 day, great. If it's a weekend, great. One of the last things I would want is to disrupt the feeling of community, particularly in that area. 271, the folks that live there that have an active Airbnb in the backyard, that's Emily and Mark. And they've got 2 young daughters. I don't remember the ages, I'm gonna guess like 2 to 4. I can guarantee you, they don't wanna have a bunch of ex-frat guys in the building next door, or somebody throwing a big party in the backyard, or a bunch of people even in the front yard. That is 100% against who we want to rent to. And honestly, the way we want to furnish it would be the worst thing we could do for those type of furnishings. The other thing I'll bring up, and I kind of learned this just kind of through the research, is typically the Airbnb renter takes better care of the place. For one, they have a rating that's tied to that. For two, there are significant security deposits that are in play. And for that reason, you tend to have people that take care of the property. The whole idea is it's a home away from home. When you stay in Airbnbs, when you travel, you could have a choice of staying in a Hilton or a Marriott or whatever hotel is around. But my guess is you make that choice because you want to feel like it's a home away from home. And that's all that we're looking to provide. It really is. You raised some really good points, particularly around the affordability for folks that live here year-round. I recognize that. Like, I grew up in this area. I don't know how our home changes that or makes it worse, or if we're just one of many and there's a flock more coming. I don't know any of that. I know we want to provide a great place, a place that we want to use. And I didn't really bring this up before. I guess I didn't have everything prepared. But our first priority is friends and family, not people we don't know. So when my friends want to come down and see their daughter, and it's not mom's weekend, or they want to, the mom and the aunt want to come, like that's who gets first access to it. And, as, a couple times the fluency thing was brought up, and that was kind of hard to hear. I understand it, and I don't judge it. But just from where I grew up, and my whole, family line, that was a hard one to hear because I recognize now by saying, we don't have to rent this every weekend. Our goal isn't to have maximum occupancy. In a typical business, that is exactly what the goal would be. 100%. Otherwise, you're losing money. It's the same in a restaurant or a lot of different businesses. And so I didn't mean for that to come off like we're so lucky we don't have to worry about that at all. But I can understand how it would be taken that way. I wanted it to represent that we're not desperate to have this thing filled to the gills all day, every day. That's not the ideal. So that's it, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can close the discussion. So as Mr. Riggs pointed out, we're not going through the findings because it's conditional use, so we give our opinion. So let's have a discussion of this.
Can Mr. Riggs repeat that piece?
I sure can.
Thank you.
So this is Article 7, final disposition of cases. And this, as I said, is a conditional use case. Final decisions of the board pertaining to conditional use permits, the resolution needs to contain the following. It would be everything that you would normally do. It doesn't include the 6 findings that you have for a variance, but it does include the opinion of the board as to the desirability or undesirability of the proposed use as regards adjoining premises and the general intent of the zoning ordinance. Is what you're tasked to do.
Thank you. And I think our opinions about the desirability or undesirability of the project would probably be guided a little bit by the principles in the findings, such as absence of detriment. And we have had some speakers who feel that it would be a detriment. But the thing that stands out in my mind is that there have been some very personal views and very persuasive personal stories presented here. But that what is striking to me is that the code basically requires owner-occupied for Airbnb. And now this is a case where we're being asked to give a conditional use permit for non-owner occupied. It seems to me if we do that, we're going to get a lot more requests for the same. And that would suggest I mean, to me, that seems like we were writing code. Maybe the council could have done a better job about why they didn't make, didn't include non-owner occupied or whatever. But I personally am not comfortable just starting down that particular road without letting council consider whether that is really something they want to do, and let people come, like Ms. McCosker, Mr. Stauffer, Ms. Hughes, and talk to them about what they think would be the problems with that. What are your thoughts?
I think council chose not to do it because a can of worms was going to be opened and they wanted to pass that off. That's what I think.
I will agree with you.
That's what I think.
It-
I don't
it's just
feel
because-
comfortable making that decision for council.
Sure.
Because we dealt with this for,
Yeah.
I've been on the board 5-6 years now. Every month it was somebody looking for a variance for a B&B before it was in law.
Before they got, yeah.
But they particularly pointed out certain streets for B&Bs, which now opens up more people coming in and asking for variance for those particular locations. And the fact that it's basically one next door to it kind of puts stuff on the. I personally believe this is something city council should address, because this is going to change a lot.
Yeah, this would change everything.
They
Well,
did, and they put it off on the BZA.
Yeah, they put it on us.
Yeah.
They directly wrote that into code, that
Yeah.
they didn't want to make this decision, so they didn't look whichever way they chose. to not.
Specifically only in the non-owner occupied case, right?
Occupied, which if.
In the owner occupied, that's
Not
covered
an
by,
option.
that's,
Right. Then it would be a
that's,
variance here instead of this request for the.
no, it would just be allowed, right?
it would just be allowed.
Yeah.
Be allowed.
Yeah, the reason we had to consider a
Yeah,
variance
for
in the
R1,
next door
yeah.
neighbor's home is because it was owner occupied, but the actual rental was a separate building.
Yep.
And we did grant that variance.
And it was owner occupied.
Yeah, they were in the main house.
The property house, yeah.
Yes.
So this is sort of, this would change everything, and I personally am not comfortable making that kind of decision, because I think that's a legislative decision.
I concur.
That's interesting.
That's my take.
So, a question for Mr. Riggs along this line is, what was just sort of stated was that this may set a precedent if we approve this. I don't know if that's the case. I know with the variances at least, each, and the previous chair would say this every time basically, is when we're looking at a case, is the particular nuances of the case we were looking at are what was important. Just because we made a similar variance for another property doesn't mean we have to do it for this one.
Right.
Is that the same kind of situation with this, or would it be setting more of a precedent if we approve this?
So my opinion on that is that those 6 findings that you have in the variance request, they really define where you would have exceptions between 2 different people asking for a variance request. You don't really have that here. It's opinion.
So if, a scenario, say somebody comes in to Athens and buys 25 properties in an R1 zone and comes in for a variance on all of them at one time, with the sole focus of being non-owner occupied Airbnbs, we would be in a similar situation, just opening up a can of worms, potentially.
But that R1 only varies on those streets.
On those streets,
Right.
correct.
So it's the 4 main
Or if they're
streets.
abutting a business zone.
That'd be-
Just saying, just
right.
to be specific.
And just to really, make this clear, this conditional use is ongoing and with the property, it would not at any point go away unless it were stripped.
It could if the use stopped altogether. So if the house was abandoned, for instance, for a year and then came back again, it would need to go back for back to this board for a conditional.
Does it have to go through a rental permit process as well?
It would, yes.
So if the rental permit were dropped for a year,
Yes.
that would be the triggering event?
Yes.
But what if the house is sold in July of this year? Do that stays with that address?
Yes, it would
even
stay.
though-
It would stay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes with the property until there's a a period of time for non-use.
Right. And rental permits are the same way. They
Yeah.
they go
Yeah.
with the property,
So
until
if
they're
his
dropped.
daughter moved in and became resident, she would, and then wanted to go back to the Airbnb, she would have to,
So one way to get around that is to continue to pay the rental permit, even though you're not renting it or anything, but you continually pay the rental permit. That would stay
keep
into
that going.
effect. Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
because the same owner.
Yeah.
Well, this is all very interesting. It raises some really important questions, and I know that some of us have whined about the code and things coming to us that we don't think are really appropriately brought here. And I'm gonna whine about the same.
Still whining.
I'm officially whining here.
Well, the original issue was the B&Bs, 4 years ago, 3
Yeah.
years ago. And it's now we had a same situation, but and the city had to address it because we brought it up. We said the city need to address this.
I think it's actually upsetting to me because I remember we turned down one, at least I voted against one or two. I know one or two were turned down, and then we started thinking, well, gee, it seems reasonable, and so we started okaying them, and then council changed the code, but I think it should go in the other direction, personally.
We have to look at the detriment to the community, and just studies that I've read recently in reference to Airbnb effect on communities as far as increasing rents, and we're having problems in this community presently referencing low-income housing and people's affordability to live in the city. I think this would go against, if we grant this, I think it would go against what other organizations are trying to succeed, to accomplish in the community.
Yeah, I would suggest that, as Lorraine said, that, a singular case isn't changing the outcome very much, but we don't have from the legislative, side support for an actual vision for addressing the housing issue.
Right.
Yeah, good or bad in this specific case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're gonna be a town that has non-owner occupied Airbnbs, that's something council should,
Right, we already have 75% rental
Yeah.
rates that
That's
are
insane.
many non-owner occupied.
Right.
Many in R1s as well.
Right.
Like that's so.
And that was always the argument in the past on the B&Bs, when people
Yeah.
would come in, and the biggest issue was the location of the houses. If somebody came in, wanted something on Grosvenor or wanted something on, your traditional, say somebody came in, so want something on Elmwood, but not East 8th Street. That's kind of why I feel like they came up what they did on a particular streets.
Yeah,
Because
I will kind of concur. I've had 2 requests for Airbnbs this week from friends that are, wanting to come and visit parents in Athens, and there are none available. In this neighborhood, specifically. So there is also it is a real need also that you have short-term rentals that are more family friendly and kid friendly than the Hampton.
the biggest complaint I ever heard, just being on just different groups, is that there's no long-term stay hotels in town. Like people I know that
Yeah.
work, there's no kitchenettes, so people always looking for, monthly rentals, that's coming in visit professors. So
Yeah, my business partner had a really hard time
Yeah.
finding
but
monthly
yeah.
Airbnb
Yeah.
in Athens.
And I once again, I think this is something that city council should
Okay.
address.
Yeah.
so does it seem, go ahead.
So another sort of question here is, so if this is denied, or say this is granted, either way, this property owner, what's his chances of getting a long-term, or what would be his process for getting a long-term rental if he decided he would do that instead of this? So say he got this short-term rental, would he be able to convert it to long-term rental? What's the process? for
Yeah,
this?
non-owner occupied in an R1 rental is permitted by this code.
And so what's the approval process for that?
It'd be the same as for any rental. He submits a long-term rental permit. We have to inspect it. make sure that it meets all the code requirements, and then he would pay an annual fee for that rental permit.
So as it stands now, if he's bought this house, if he is not able to short-term rental it, he could request a permit without having to come back to us. This is just through the code office, through the normal process. And unless something is wrong with the property, it doesn't meet standards, he could be granted a long-term rental, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Put 3 adults in
Not
that.
more than 2
Yeah, according to-
renters by a resident owner, or not more than 3 adult renters plus related children for a non-resident owner, and this is for long-term rentals
Right.
in that zone, for periods of greater than 30 days.
So,
So-
how many permits have came across for that location for B&Bs?
For that,
For East State in general?
for the whole city, we haven't had more than 16, so there aren't very many.
So B&B is that short-term rental?
Short-term rentals, yeah, yeah.
So can I let her come up?
Yeah.
Okay, you need to come up to the podium again.
I just would like to say that this is a bigger picture issue. So how much of our housing stock do we keep allowing to go to rental?
Got to talk to city council about
Yeah.
that.
We can't.
We are not in charge of that.
What all do these
Yeah.
variances? I mean, and this has been going on since I came 20 years ago, and it was pretty obvious then that the people who are doing those rentals, many have many rentals, have taken those houses out of circulation. I know someone in the west side that actually purchased a house, just to take it out of rental circulation, fixed it up, and then found somebody to own it. You know, at a very reasonable cost, just because they wanted that to be more, to have that. And I think that that's a problem. So if this person isn't allowed to do short-term, but they can do long-term, well,
But we have
We
no
can't stop
control.
that.
So we do a
can't stop
case,
that.
we just hear variance requests and
but
so
you're all
on.
involved in the city. I would hope that at some point that these critical issues are addressed, because,
Not in this body.
okay.
Yeah.
You should definitely talk to the planning commission, the council. They're the people that make the plans. We just hear the
I mean,
cases.
because even if we say no short-term, that location can still be set up as a rental.
That's
for
the
long-term.
code.
As in code.
That's
I
the
will
law.
say that it seems a little more difficult nowadays. I'm hearing anything over 3 bedrooms is difficult rental property, and now people are going 1 and 2 bedrooms. So I think that's going to be a little more difficult in today's market. Having long-term 3-bedroom houses are more difficult to rent than a single-bedroom unit presently.
I just
So
like
that's
to say,
my take on
we
that.
don't really
Come on up.
or wish, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
We're gonna use the property a fair amount ourselves. So a long-term rental would make that impossible, actually.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry to say, but we have no guarantee of that.
Yeah.
I know, I
Just as-
totally understand that.
Yeah.
So
What I could tell you all from being a landlord, based upon the purchase price, and the location, this mortgage alone is gonna be $1,700 to $1,800 a month before you do insurance and taxes.
property taxes, yeah.
We're not, he's not gonna make a profit on long-term rental. I could tell you as a landlord for a year.
Yeah, but that's not
But that has
something.
nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that we're all talking about it,
Right.
business-wise, long-term rental for him at that place, for what he paid,
Right.
not a good sound
Okay.
investment.
Thank you.
So I think we're ready to vote. The motion is, someone needs to move to approve a conditional use for the property at address, blah, blah, blah. And so read from the agenda, if you like. Who could make
I'm
a
not
motion?
voting tonight, right? Me.
Yeah, I guess you guys don't have to vote. Yeah, we got our 5. Who would like to make a motion?
I can. I move to approve a conditional use permit to the property at 269 East State Street in accordance with ACC 230401C3 to allow a non-owner occupied short-term rental in an R1 zone.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All wishing to grant the conditional use, please raise your right hand of the voting members. Oh, sorry, I got confused. Yeah, raise your right hand, voting members, if you approve. Raise your right hand if you are opposed to granting the conditional use variance. Okay. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, for coming and expressing your views. And good luck, sir, with your property. So we have two other items to deal with. One is the minutes. Was it? No, okay, yeah. When was our last meeting? Was it in
December.
It was December. So those who were present
December
and,
13th.
oh,
Say hello to Kurt, Jack.
I just want to say thank you, and I wish I came across more smoothly and
You were
more
fine.
more polite, but
you're absolutely fine.
it's an
yeah.
important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You were fine. Thanks, everybody. So, who has read the minutes, or how many here were here?
I was
Yeah. Okay. Did everyone, someone want to move? Okay, do we have to move?
Make a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes as written. Aaron, you so moved?
I so moved to approve the
And then
minutes
someone
from
has to
December
second
13th.
that.
I'll second.
Okay, all relevant members who wish to approve the minutes, raise your right hand. Aren't I good at this? Anyone opposed? No. Okay, now we have a business meeting.
Is this still on recording?
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
business being
Is
live?
the business meeting?
Oh, I
It needs
think,
to be live?
is it not?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Sunshine
still
law
live
means
now.
it should be technically.
Oh, we can
think
do it.
so.
We can certainly do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So the only thing that I know of, as I wrote to you, I don't think you probably got that. I'm sorry. I should have included you.
It's okay.
It's just that I remembered, I suddenly remembered we're supposed to have a business meeting. The only thing I ever saw happen at a business meeting was the chair saying, does anyone else want to be chair? Is that about right?
I think so.
Okay,
Yep.
so I sent out an email and I said, does anyone want to be chair or wish to nominate anyone else to be chair? And I did not get any responses.
Question is, do you want to remain chair?
I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to have someone else do it.
Well, which one are you wanting?
Oh, I'm
Because
either,
it's a year, right? We do this every year.
Yeah, every year.
Correct.
yeah, I'm happy to do this job, and I don't love it or want to, if someone else would like to
I mean,
do
that's
it.
how I feel the quality of job you do.
Whatever, then
I think
step
all
right
of,
up, Joe.
I think all of us are happy for you to do it. as
That's fine.
opposed to-
I'm happy to do it.
You're doing- I
Anybody
think you're
else?
doing
Nobody else?
fine. Does anyone want to? Rob?
So,
Rob?
Rob seems kind of
Rob?
tempted.
Maybe next year.
Oh,
Maybe next year.
Sure. No, sure.
I'm nominating Rob for next year right now.
Yeah, I'll do it right now.
Always next
Sure.
year.
Why don't we?
wait a doggone minute. Maybe next year I'll want to stay.
Then we have to vote
Then
on
we have to vote.
Do we have to have me be chair again, or can we just,
So I would move
yeah?
for Lisa Carson to be reappointed as chair of the Board of Zoning
Really
Appeals
vote it
for
in.
2023.
I'll second.
Okay, you guys have to vote.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
So, Joe. Sure.
You got to end the meeting. You got to end the meeting.
The meeting is now.